Waiting for the mic. You got a mic?
Yeah, I want to make sure this works.
Okay. All right. Testing 1, 2. Okay.
There you go.
Got it. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back? If you can hear me, raise your hand. My name's David Suissa. I'm president of Tribe Media in Los Angeles. I think today will go down in history. 1,500 Israel lovers inside the United Nations. Welcome to the session on fighting BDS on campus. We have a packed schedule, so let's get started. Our first discussion is called One Stop Shop Against BDS. We're going to have two great speakers, and then I'll go on stage for a discussion. Let me ask David Sable, Global CEO of Y&R, to get us started. David.
Is this on? Toda rabba. So, by the way, you can Google this. When I was 18 years old, I was arrested downstairs in the United Nations with Rabbi Avi Weiss and Rabbi Riskin when, in what was the most extraordinary day. I'm happy to tell you the story later. Google it. It's very interesting. So I only have 10 minutes. Can I have the slides, please? Slides? Okay. So let me set the stage. Right? This is really important. Setting this stage is always important. Let me set the stage. Listen carefully. Not everyone who criticizes Israel is anti-Israel. Not everyone who criticizes Israel is an anti-Semite. And maybe for this audience, 1,500 people have come together to support Israel in the UN. Maybe the most important is that not every Jew that supports BDS is a self-hating, ignorant Jew. And I think we need to understand that. We might not like them, but they're not self-hating necessarily, and they're certainly not ignorant. So where does that take us? If nothing else, if you get nothing else out of my next 10 minutes, we need to stop talking to ourselves. That is the key message that I have to give to you. So let me explain something. We have a study called BAV, Brand Asset Valuator. You can look it up on ynr.com. My 10 minutes doesn't give me enough time to explain it. It's been the basis of the Brand Israel study for 16 years. It's used by the Foreign Ministry. It's used by the Consulate. It's used all over the world, and it's used by brands and countries. We launched the best country study at Davos this year. This is what this study has shown us, and we've studied this very carefully. At the end of the day, we're not the center of the universe. The fact of the matter is, there are as many people who just don't care as who do care. And we've got to keep that in mind. We've got to remember that, because there are lots of people who don't care, and the people who don't care are probably, at one point or another, the most important people for us to talk to, because we're not going to talk to ourselves. That's a waste of time. Very often, it's hard to change people's minds. It's the people who are on the fence who are important. So in 10 minutes, Brand Israel, why we're losing the social media war. More importantly, just to show you how we're losing the social media war, and then my let's be clear. So let's take a look at what the data says. If you look at the red is what our study tells us Israel, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv stand for across a variety of countries. So in other words, if I take an aggregate of how Israel is viewed around the world, Israel ends up being in what we call the indifferent quadrant. People really don't care. They're in the indifferent quadrant. In the United States, it's different though. We're in a commitment quadrant. We're way up on top. So the blue is America. So in America, Brand Israel is actually thought of pretty well, as is Jerusalem. What's most interesting is that Tel Aviv, who we often think is sort of the leading edge of how people think about Israel, is not that well thought of even in America. Now again, it doesn't mean it's not it's thought of poorly. It just means that people are sort of indifferent to it. So the message hasn't gotten out as much as we thought it has. Another way of looking at this, our study allows us to take attributes. So we don't ask a question about a country and say, well, what would you relate that country to? We just look at all the attributes about a country, and we say, what else has similar attributes? What else looks the same? So when Americans talk about the UK, and we look at other companies that have similar attributes, it's BBC, it's Guinness, it's Tumi. In Italy, Disney, Vespa, Country Living, Japan, Star Wars. Australia is sort of obvious, right? The party country. The problem is when Americans look at Israel, when we pull out that data and say, what are the attributes? The United Nations, isn't that funny? The United Nations, the NRA, and Brookings, but understand how Americans feel about the United Nations. So we're not alone in our view of the United Nations. I think it's pretty obvious. All you have to do is follow the election, and you kind of know what at least 50% of the country feels about the United Nations. And part of the problem is that Israel's personality is alienating. So when we do this study around the world, and again, these are just some of the attributes that we look at, but the top 2 highest scores by market are for distant and no nonsense. So when you think about distant, it's companies like Goldman Sachs, Bentley, the NRA, Greenpeace, the New York Times. Again, this is not a question of left or right. It's just a question of people view these as distant. It's hard for them to connect to them. You don't love them. Even if you like the New York, even if you read the New York Times every day, you don't love it. It's not warm. It's not fuzzy. Superior, the Marines, Microsoft, Mount Clinton, those are okay. It's good to be that. But again, we're not talking about things that people can wrap their arms around, and the same with no nonsense. So we're kind of alienating. We're not that warm and fuzzy country that we think we are. But this, perhaps, is the single most important piece of data that we've been sharing for years. So if you ask Israelis, and by the way, I am an Israeli citizen. I served in Tzahal, so I consider myself to be an Israeli as much as I'm an American. If you ask the average Israeli, and even if you listen to our own rhetoric, what do we say? There's nobody like us in the Mideast. We're just like you, America. We are the democracy just like you. We are the country just like you. You should be relating to us because we're just like you. And yet, when you look at our data, we're not like me. We're not like the U.S. Americans don't see us that way. And again, remember, this data doesn't ask people the question, which is the key thing to understand. We don't say, do you think Israel is like you? We just pull the attributes out. We pull the attributions out. So we're able to create these graphs and these studies, and they're accurate specifically because they don't ask that question. So we've always believed we're just like you. We're not. Now, I told you about our study, Best Countries. We launched at Davos. It's been tweeted by Bibi, by Justin Trudeau, by Angela Merkel. It's been tweeted by everyone because people's data was very important to them. And countries like Sweden show up for citizenship, Germany #1 for entrepreneurship, France, Italy, United States for cultural influence, etc. Canada for quality of life. That's what Justin had tweeted. Where Israel ends up in the top, the only one we're in the top 10, is in the area that we call tanks and banks, which is essentially the old view of power, right? It means that you have power around influence of strong military, of international alliances, economical and political, right? So it is the old way of looking at the world. And what's critical is that what our study has taught us is that power today is looked at in a completely different way. People judge a country's power not based on the tanks and banks, that's sort of obvious, but on entrepreneurship, quality of life, and citizenship. And when you look at that, we're number 21 in entrepreneurship, 34 in quality of life, and 24 in citizenship. So in one way, I could say, hey, that's not bad. We're in the top 50, not bad. That's a good place to be. We're a young country. On the other hand, I think these are all qualities that we would argue we're way higher on. And again, we talk to ourselves. We're not. We're not seen that way. Remember, these are perception. Doesn't mean it's truth. This is not emet. This is perception that people have. So high in tanks and banks, but low in the qualities and the measurements that countries are using today. And I can tell you, because we have a number of countries who are our clients and use this data, this is important data to know. So let's look at the social war. This is really critical. BDS owns share of voice. This is the last 12 months, right? So 78% of all the volume around this has been for BDS, 22% is anti-BDS. And when you look at the breakdowns, we get killed in the blogs, Twitter, and in forums. Now, let's be clear, because you're going to see why in a second. We are anti. We are reactive. They are proactive. So if you follow the blue or the gray, I'm not sure because it doesn't come out here quite the same, you can see the BDS traffic and what they put out, and then you can see the spikes as we put out following what they put out. So we are reactive, they are proactive. By definition, when you're reactive in social media, you're just not going to be as powerful. You're not going to be out there as much. And one of the reasons is their content is highly discoverable. We've done a complete analysis of all the content. Their online content is optimized for discovery, so it's easy to find, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to share. Every single page is visually exciting and interesting, and every little piece of data has a share button. So whatever gets put out is easy to share. So I can take it, I click, and I share it. When you look at the stuff that gets put out for the anti-BDS movement, it's frank, I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody in the room, it's dated, it's uninviting, it's hard to find. And again, go Google it yourselves, go try to find it. It is not that easy. Now again, part of the problem is when you're anti, much harder. When you're pro, it's easy because their message is positive, get it? It's a positive message. Ours is a negative by definition. We're anti, they're pro. That's it. Harder to find, but even so, it's just not as inviting. And I think when you look at this, it really gets you going and makes you understand. We look like a corporate brochure. What they've put out is a creative platform for self-expression. So if you were a college student and you were trying to pick a side and you were trying to understand, which one would you go for? Which would be more interesting for you? Which would be easier to understand and to get into and to get involved with? Clear. So we had a problem, my friends. Now, the latest manifestation is equating everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter. Now, I got to tell you, I was at the debate in Brooklyn between Hillary and Bernie. It's quite an event. The ferry ride there was actually probably one of the best parts of it. Having said that, what became clear to me and why I re-emphasize this notion about anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, read the statement carefully. Read the statement carefully. When I show up in Palestine, nothing would prepare me for the level of violence and militarization that the Palestinian people are under. The constant sort of battering and terrorizing by military, and for us by police, is eerily similar. I had the dime drop on me at the debate because I also came in under the impression that it was something else until I realized, I couldn't figure out. I was sitting in the middle of the Harlem elite, and I know many of these people. I work with them. And all of a sudden, people that I talk to every day, people that I have brought to Israeli affairs, people that I've had at the consulate, were supporting this. And I couldn't get it until it hit me. So again, don't dismiss everything out of hand so quickly. Try to understand. Try to be clear on what's happening. So with that being said, let's be clear. Enough with the most moral army, most democratic country, most free society. Great. We all believe it. We believe it in our heart. We sing Hatikva. It's great. It's beautiful. But that's not winning the war. It hasn't helped us in the least bit. And I think that Tom Friedman said it the best, right? The third intifada is based on a strategy of making Israelis feel strategically secure, but morally insecure. So the more we talk like that, the more morally insecure we're making ourselves look and frankly feel as the messages don't resonate. And Israelis need to own this. And by the way, we'll share this data, and the entire presentation will be made available to everybody. You're all free to have it. Israel needs to own it, right? And so whether it was Yosef Shapiro who criticized the foreign ministry for not inability to present any significant achievement in the battle, which is sort of unfair because I don't think it's completely on them, and even Michael Oren, it's aching for reform. We need to own this from the center. It's not enough. You need to own it. It's great, but we need to make sure that the government ministries own it in the right way, not in the way they want to, but in the way that actually makes sense for this country and others. Is this clicking? Good. And we have to stop talking to ourselves. I said this before, but I'm going to prove it to you. The video that literally just blew the BDS movement to smithereens. Many of you saw it, right? Basically everybody I know who has anything to do with Israel has seen it. Here's the facts, right? 761 views, favorited 0 times, commented in 5 times, and the engagement was so minimal, it doesn't show up in the social register. We can't even measure it. And this is the video that blew the BDS movement to smithereens. Guys, we got to stop it. So defensiveness is not effective. There's a great statement by Fred Lawrence. A model based not on advocacy, but on engagement turns out to be the most effective way of dealing with BDS. And of course, the famous Brandeis bridges that were built. And today is all about building bridges, so people need to pay attention to that. And we need Generation World, right? Generation World is basically the most important people in today's world globally. These are people who don't look at age, they don't look at demographic, they don't look at their social status. All they look at is values. Values is what connect them. We've done a lot of work on this and a lot of studies on this, and it's fact. And so what we need to do is to reach out more. We need to make sure that we're reaching out to the right people, that we have the right messages, and that we know what we're saying. And we have to stop looking and thinking, make me a viral like we're Harry Potter, and somehow it just happens. These social engagements, these things, and this is what BDS does, they pay to play. They have a unified message and a movement. Pictures aren't enough. They have incredible graphics. They have good technology behind it. This is what we need to start emulating. And it is our thing. So, again, it's not a criticism of AIPAC. They've been involved in other things, but they have said that this is not their problem. It is their problem as well. It's all of our problems. So this is the last piece, and I think it probably passed my 10 minutes, but sorry. Number 1, stop talking to ourselves. Critical. I hope I made that point. 2, be bold. Don't be afraid. We have a great message, but you have to be bold about it. We can't be defensive. Anti-BDS is great, but if you're anti, by definition, we're behind the 8 ball. We need to be bold. Engage in ways that make you uncomfortable. We have to be uncomfortable. Go talk to the other people. Shimon Peres always says, who do you make peace with if not with your enemies? Go on campus. This is particularly for the younger people here. Go talk to the people. Agree with them. Tell them they've got a point and get a discussion going. See what happens. You have to be bold. We have to change the language. We have to really go out of our way. Don't be afraid to agree on key points. I do. Let me tell you something. I've had many Palestinians in my office. I had a group that came in who run a very interesting website, a website about Israeli atrocities on the West Bank. So the first time they came to show them to me, and they showed me soldiers beating up kids on the street, and they said, oh, did that make you uncomfortable? Did we make you feel? I said, no, actually, I've seen worse. I was a soldier. I was there. And it changed the conversation in a second. I didn't agree with them. They have a point, I have a point, but at least it got us to a place where we could have a discussion. So we can't be scared. Don't be afraid to agree on key points, because that is what takes the wind out of their sails. The issue is for us to take the wind out of their sails. That is the problem. We keep putting the wind in because we make them more important than they are. And we don't have the right arguments because we keep trying to prove that we're the best, the most moral, the greatest, yada, 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 and it's a sin to support BDS. Wrong argument. Hasn't worked. It's never going to work. So with that, I thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, David. It's now my pleasure to ask Frank Luntz, CEO of Luntz Global Partners, to share his insights. Mr. Luntz.
Well, you're going to remember this when it's done in about 4 or 5 minutes. Are you going to sit and have that thing up the entire time? It's just weird for me. I'm glad you came out here because I see too many people just stand behind podiums and they don't even get close to the people that they want to reach. That the only way that this is ever going to work for you all, by the way, it's not effort. And there's so much of what we do when they talk about effort. It is not effort, it is result. And I'm going to be able to show you a few things, and then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation that you are not expecting. But can you just keep the slides up? I can see you all, and I realize I'm fat, so can I just have the slides up, please? And do not take them down. When I walked in here, that woman who's standing over there, she comes up to me and she says, "You look much thinner in person than you do on television." What am I supposed to do with that? So I want you to see where things stand. I'm going to give you the statistics of where things stand, and then we're going to try to work on how to address it. Number one is that things have really changed on college campuses. If you did a survey today, you'd find that, and when I was in school, I was at the University of Pennsylvania, probably the school was a third Jewish, maybe 40%. There was no opposition to Israel whatsoever. Schools across the country now have tremendous challenges, and all of these numbers were taken within the last 90 days. So you got 20% or more pro-Palestinian. Only 30%, less than 1 out of 3, consider themselves pro-Israel. It's not that they're anti-Israel, it's that they're neutral. And that is where we are losing. We're losing people who at one point were softly pro-Israel and now have decided that they do not want to take sides. You actually have a third of college students who don't even necessarily believe in Israel's right to exist. And that's partially because they do not know the history. They do not know the facts behind 1948. Am I urging you to tell them the facts? Actually, no. Because if you have a history lesson, you will lose a 19-year-old so fast. You have to find a way to kind of sneak it in. Next, you actually have almost 40%. And we took the language of the Palestinian Authority, the exact words that they are using. They issued a press release in November explaining where they stood on these various issues. And this is their language. And so they said that all Israeli land should be returned to the Palestinians. Almost 40% agree with that. 43%, if the language is to boycott Israel to curb mistreatment of Palestinians, if that is the narrative, you're getting close to 50%. Now understand that this is the Palestinian narrative. This is what happens if you all remain silent. I want you to really feel how bad it can get if the decision going forward is to let someone else deal with this, is to let someone else react to it. A couple more because it gets even worse. 44% of college kids believe Israel is practicing apartheid. 45% blame Israel for the current conflict. 48% trust the Palestinian government more than the Israeli government. I mean, these numbers are bad. And 2 more. Only 51% want the U.S. to support Israel, and 54% aren't sure if Hamas is a terrorist organization. Now, understand that this is not that they're saying that Hamas isn't. It's that half of college students don't even know either what Hamas is or what Hamas does. We are not teaching, and for those of you up there in the cheap seats, I feel sorry for you guys. How many of you are in high school up there? Raise your hands. Okay, good for you for being here. By the way, if you're a guy, raise your hands. If you're a woman, raise your hands. There are 2 women for every man. The guys in here, you got it lucky. Think about that. So these are the statistics behind this. And I want to show you one more because I can't go beyond this. These are the values, and notice the difference between Republicans and Democrats. So let me give you 2 findings that really matter. Israel is having its greatest challenges among women, much more than men, among Democrats, much more than Republicans, and among 18 to 29-year-olds more than any other age group. Those are the three groups. And so I'm not looking to speak to people who already agree with me. I'm not trying to talk to a 55-year-old guy who votes Republican. I'm going to talk. I want my language to message a 23-year-old female college senior or someone in graduate school. I want to speak young, I want to speak left, and I want to speak to the women. And look at the language up there. Freedom matters more than anything else to Republicans. Doesn't even come in the top 5 among Democrats. What matters for Democrats? Promoting equality, promoting human rights, that it's democratic. Only 10% choose social justice. For the Democrats, it's 32%. I want you to focus on the Democratic language. I want you to focus on language to the left. I want you to imagine when you are communicating Israel that you are speaking to a 21-year-old college Democrat woman. That's the people that you need to reach out to. Now, I have all this language, and here's the problem. And I was spending the last 5 minutes while you were going through your presentation trying to figure out what I should do here. And now you're going to tell me when this is done whether this is right or wrong. There are a couple people in this room right now who support BDS, who tweet about it, who write about it on social media. I have language that I would like to show you, but I think that I would actually do damage, that people would take photographs of it and put it out. And this is the challenge. The people who are hostile to Israel wake up in the morning trying to figure out how to ruin its reputation. Do you wake up in the morning trying to figure out how to save it? The people who are hostile to Israel will go to any lengths, will come to a meeting like this so they can take photographs and figure out what's going on to turn it against us. Do we wake up in the morning trying to figure out how to promote the nature of the country and what it does and what it contributes? So I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker. I will candidly answer any questions that you have, but I ask your forgiveness, because if I present this, it will be used against everyone in this room. And I would rather disappoint you than do any damage for Israel.
Should I use this one? Okay. Is your mic on? Yeah, just press the left button. The left button.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to spend a few minutes having a discussion, notwithstanding what Frank just said. I saw a lot of similarities between both presentations in terms of not speaking to ourselves. One of the things that David said that intrigued me was the idea of being bold and taking the wind out of their sails. If you can elaborate on that specifically with a focus on what kind of narrative would take the wind out of their sails.
So let me explain the concept, because it's very, and I've written about this, you can find it online. Many years ago, the company that I learned my public relations skills from, Burson Marsteller, was the company that worked for Tylenol when the Tylenol was found in Chicago. Some of you remember the story. Somebody died from poison, yada, yada, yada. It's a long story. Go look it up. Bottom line, they had a choice. They could leave the Tylenol on the shelves and keep telling everybody, well, you know, it's okay. We're pretty sure. It's all right. Only one person died. Or they could do something bold and take the Tylenol off the shelves completely, destroy it all, and return back to market in 6 months with a new top, a new tamper-proof top. And that's what they did. And Harold Burson, who was the chairman of Burson Marsteller at the time, made the case to their board. The board said, you're crazy because we'll go bust. He said, no, you're crazy because if you don't do it, you're going to go bust. They did it. Their business today is better than ever. That's taking the wind out of the sails. So I believe that, and I think that I tried to be clear, that sometimes in the BDS narrative, there are many people who might agree with a piece of it. I mean, I've been to sessions where we said, okay, you know what? We agree with you. We agree with you. Let's look at the criteria. Let's get Israel off the table, and let's look at the criteria. What are the criteria that are driving you to BDS? And you get a list of criteria. Great. Now let's look at all the other countries in the world that fit that criteria, which, by the way, includes the United States of America. All of a sudden, it changes the conversation, not with the virulent people, because you're never going to forget it. The people who hate are people who hate. But the people, as Frank was talking about and as I was talking about before, the people on the fence who just, they go with it because to them it sounds right. The narrative sounds right because that's all they're hearing. And all of a sudden, when they stop to think about it, and they say, wow, you know, it's not just one country, it's not just Israel. And maybe this is kind of stupid because why are we isolating one little country in the world when there's so many? By the way, probably buy stuff from many of those countries. I probably have things in my house from those countries. I probably support them in ways I don't know. All of a sudden, it changes the conversation. So I just think that we have to find ways to change that conversation, to be bold and get into the discussion.
But what I'm hearing here is a certain normalizing of Israel. Like we're not any worse or better than the average democracy. Is that what I'm hearing? Sort of.
So, look, let's be clear. In this room, it's great. You want to think that we're better, and it's great. I'm all for it. And I didn't go there to be in Tzahal, and I didn't move there and become a citizen because I thought that it was worse than anyone else. But I think that if we continue with this notion that somehow we're better, let me tell you something. I spent a week during the Gaza war working with the Army on social media. It was pretty interesting. Now, when you sit there, think about this, right? Think about messaging, and this is what Frank is about as much as I am, maybe more so. And you talk about the most moral army in the world, and you're the mother of a U.S. SEAL sitting in Minnesota whose son is in God knows where, doing God knows what, and she hears you talking about how you're the most moral army, ergo, her son's not in the most moral army. How do you think that woman feels? Do you think she wants to support us? Do you think she jumps on that bandwagon and says, great, Israel, I love it because they're the most moral army in the world. My son's not in the most. It's just not. We got to get over it. There is a normalization that occurs. We are a country. We have issues. We're a young country. We're 60-plus years old. America's screwed up and we're a couple of 100 years old. Hello? We're still trying to figure it out. So, yeah, I think that that's got to be part of what we do.
I want to jump in
Frank,
on that.
go ahead.
So 4 things in terms of the narrative. Number 1 is the most simple sentence you possibly could say. And by the way, it works in family relationships for spouses as well as it does in global politics. 3 words. I get it. When people come at you and they say, well, what about this and this and this? Why were so many buildings destroyed in Gaza? Why were so many buildings destroyed in Lebanon? Why does Israel have this and this? Or why are the Palestinians suffering? The first thing you respond is empathy, not attack. I get it. And you have to say it 3 times. If you're being yelled at by your spouse, the only way to get her to calm down is, I get it. And then it's, I get it, and then I get it. And at that point, the divorce lawyers go back into the cages. But this works. I get it shows that you are listening. And for young people, they want to know that you hear them. You cannot dismiss it. That's number 1. Number 2 is that as Jews, we are such good communicators because we ask questions. For 2,000 years, we ask questions. The Bible is all about questions. When I was a child, I would ask my mother, how far is the earth from the sun? Her answer, how far do you think it is? Do you understand why Jewish men are meshuggah? When you ask a question, what would you do? If Canada had these bombs and they kept raining in on Seattle, on Chicago, on Detroit. Well, Detroit's a bad example because you might actually let them bomb Detroit. But if you're in that situation, you ask a question, what would you do? What do you want us to do? How can we do it better? A simple question engages the mind and it connects people. Third, no matter what happens in Gaza, no matter what happens on the West Bank, we are human beings. It is part of our culture, it is part of our teaching to respect those, even those who do not respect us. To show sympathy for the Palestinian people is not to weaken our support for Israel. In fact, it is to strengthen it, because these people are being mistreated. They do not have human rights. They do not have social justice. They cannot do things that other countries can do, not because of Israel, but because of their own governments. The enemy is not Israel. And number 4 is the Hamas Charter. Because in the Hamas Charter, it says that their magic tree, which I still do not understand, but in the Hamas Charter, it's talking about a magic tree. There is a Jew standing behind me, come and kill him. In the English, the official English translation to the Hamas Charter. Why? Why is it that in their songs, they preach death to Jews, not to Israel, but to Jews? Why is it on their MTVs and in their culture they have this sort of language? I understand their feelings towards Israel because they're being taught this every single day. Let us stop the teaching of hate, and let us start the teaching of respect, of civility, and even of love. You say that on a college campus, and that is embracing, and it will link you, not to the people who are yelling at you, but to the people we need to reach. That is how I would set the narrative.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. There's a school of thought that says the BDS movement is hypocritical. It doesn't do anything to really help the Palestinian. It's full of lies. It's got an anti-Semitic strain. And it's really sort of a movement that's really based on destruction of the reputation of Israel, like you were saying. They wake up for that. So there's a school of thought that says it's important to expose that. I want both of you to comment on that, because obviously that means taking the gloves off and going against BDS and sort of trying to do to BDS what they've done to Israel.
For me, it's not an issue of expose. It's an issue. Before I walked in here and I'm standing out there, I wrote down the word educate. Before I do any speech, because I don't use notes, I just come, sometimes I speak off slides, but I always have one word that I write down. I want you to think about the idea of education, because it means that you cannot yell. Professors don't yell. They may be biased. They may give you bad grades. I flunked calculus. I hate that guy. But I don't want to, you know, I don't want to make him live in Gaza. Well, actually, I would like to make him live in Gaza, but that's, if you are educating as opposed to exposing, that is the long-term success. I'm going to expose in the New York Times. I'm going to expose on 60 Minutes. I'm going to expose in the Wall Street Journal. For the opinion elites, I absolutely want to expose. And by the way, the number one thing you can expose, where the hell did the money go? And I use that word deliberately. Where the hell is that billions and billions of dollars that are coming from the UN, coming from this building, coming from the World Bank, coming from the European Union? They're spending billions and billions of dollars. Why is Yasser Arafat's widow one of the richest women on the face of the earth? What the hell? Why is it that these people live in poverty? Why are they building bombs and not schools? Why are they building tunnels? Where is the money coming from? That's what I want to expose. But always, always, to benefit the Palestinian people. If that money went to schools and parks and playgrounds, imagine what Israel and the Palestinians, and I mean this is not a line, imagine what the Israelis and the Palestinians could do together in the Middle East to help tens of millions of people if they were focused on schools and parks and playgrounds instead of bombs, bullets, and tunnels. That's what I want to expose.
Now, David, a lot of students here in the hall go back on their campuses, and then they'll be exposed to Israel Apartheid Week, and there'll be a big apartheid wall. How do you engage such a group, or do you ignore them?
I think the word you used was right. So Frank's word is educate, and I would just add to that engagement. So it is about engagement. I think, again, what you've heard, and I think that's common in the narrative here, is don't worry about the people you're not going to change, whose opinion you'll never change. It's a waste of time. They wake up, that's what they think about. What you need to do is think about the college students who you know, your friends, the people around them, the people who stop to listen, and those are the people you need to engage with. And you can educate them, you can have discussion with them, but you need to do it in a different way. If you set up across the way your anti-BDS booth, which we've seen, and they're yelling and you're yelling, nothing happens. And worse, if I may, is that you can see, frankly, we're just out-graphicked and out-messaged here. So we don't even have the best look on campus, and that's a problem. So I think that, again, it's a question of engagement. Everyone here knows how to engage. All of you college students, all of you high school students, you know how to engage. You know how to talk to people. You know how to meet friends. You know how to do a one-on-one. Because I can tell you that one-on-one, it's way different than when you're sitting in a crowd and people are yelling at you. And I think you all know that. You should all everyone should try to go out and think about it. Go home, go back to your campus, and engage. Find one person who might be on the fence, one friend who might have been influenced, particularly someone not Jewish, although unfortunately we have many Jewish kids also who fall into the trap occasionally. But educate them, engage them, hug them, change their opinion because you got into a discussion, not because you told them how great you are and how moral you are and how wonderful they'll be if they come to your side of the argument, because that does not work.
And the best way to change them, take them to Israel. Seriously, take them to Israel. Who in this room has not been to Israel yet? Raise your hands if you've not been to Israel. Okay, well, they're sitting right next to each other. Why have you not gone? Guy with the beard, why have you not gone?
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse. Just haven't been yet. I've done other traveling and I had the other thing, but I'm gonna go soon. Just haven't gone yet.
Okay, this year. Go
Yep.
this year.
Get on a plane.
My brother.
I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank David and Frank for opening our minds and telling us some things we didn't expect. Thank you for that. All right. And now, the next part of our program, I'd like to invite my friend, Shoham Nicolais, the CEO and co-founder of the Israeli-American Council, to speak about the fight against BDS on campus and beyond. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I think we should all thank Ambassador Danon for organizing this historic event. It is a testament to his truly visionary and courageous leadership. It's also an opportunity to thank Israel's mission to the UN and the many sponsors of today's summit. It's a very important event. I'm not going to talk about the conflict between the Israeli and Palestinians today. I'm going to speak about BDS. My family were among the 800,000 people who were thrown away from Arab countries just because they are Jews. They chose Israel, the only Jewish state. As an officer in the IDF, I fought to defend Israel from its enemies. It was a natural transition to continue my service to defend Israel when I arrived to the United States as a student more than 17 years ago, and until this day. However, something changed for me lately. I realized that our fight against BDS is not only defending Israel, we are also defending our new home, America. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke with coordinators of IC Michelano. IC Michelano brings together Israeli-American students from across the political spectrum under one roof on 94 campuses. I was shocked. I was shocked to discover that students are afraid to participate in Michelano activities out of fear that pro-BDS faculty and administration will retaliate against them. Our campuses became a hostile environment to pro-Israel Jewish students. Day after day, we receive emails from students and their parents who are forced to hide their Jewish identity because of the threat of anti-Semitism originated by BDS. If supporting Israel is cause for retaliation on campuses, if being Jewish is something that students feel compelled to hide, if we permit blood libels on Ivy Leagues, it means that the democratic values of the world's leading democracy are in danger. We cannot see BDS as a campus issue. The students of today are our leaders of tomorrow. By fighting BDS on campus, we are fighting for the future of America. This violent racist hate movement must be eliminated. We have no other choice. Today they want to eradicate Israel, but their agenda is anti-free world. Just listen to them. Tens of millions of dollars have been invested by many Jewish American organizations to fight BDS, and there are some success stories. But we need to look closely at why BDS on campuses has grown stronger. Like a cancer, their movement is multiplying, and our search for cure depends on our capacity to think outside of the box. We need to realize that our existing efforts are not good enough. We have to pivot now. We must disrupt the way we fight BDS. I will touch briefly on 5 ways that I believe can disrupt the fight against BDS. The first point is to transform the role of pro-Israel organizations in this fight. We must stop thinking like organizations and begin thinking like a movement. This means empowering our community members to lead the fight. At the ISC, for example, we tried for some time to have our staff build an anti-BDS network on campuses from the top down. It wasn't easy. Then in Boston, we let Israeli-American community members lead the effort. In no time, they organized an organic network of 150 pro-Israel advocates from the academia. We realized that empowering our community was infinitely more effective. Yet, to do this, we must educate our community. As an officer, you learn that you cannot win any war if your troops don't understand why and what it is fighting. We make the false assumption that our community understands BDS. We ask people to fight something that they do not really understand. Some are so confused that they even join these groups and fuel them. Our community is our greatest asset. We must educate and empower it. If we believe we can win this war with organizations alone, we are making a big mistake. Second point, rebrand BDS. We need to accept the fact an average student couldn't care less about Israel, Jewish state, and even anti-Semitism. They are simply too busy. This is why the current war for the hearts and minds on campus is asymmetric. We're trying to use facts that will explain why we are on the right side. BDS, on the other hand, appeals to students' emotions, talking about race, discrimination, and oppression. Rebranding Israel is very important. But we also need to focus on rebranding BDS as a hate movement. When people think BDS, their stomachs need to churn. We need to name and shame any person who supports this movement and embraces their ideology. No respected faculty member or student leader would be associated, for example, with the KKK. They should feel the same way about BDS. Joining BDS should be a mark of Cain, a one-way ticket to excommunication from polite society. Third point, faculty. BDS' biggest boost on campus comes from faculty members who integrate hate into the curriculum and discriminate against pro-Israel students. Each faculty member has the ability to impact thousands of students throughout the years. While we must fight the faculty members who support BDS, we have at the same time invest much more resources educating the others, educating the educators. Fourth point, technology. The war on social networks is important, and many organizations are doing a lot in this area, which is great, but it is not enough. The Israeli-American community is now developing a range of cutting-edge tools, moving our posture from reactive to proactive. Just a few months ago, the IC hosted a session at a cybertech conference in Israel. For the first time ever, we gathered the most brilliant Israeli technology minds in one room and asked them how we can leverage their unique knowledge to fight BDS. All I will say here is that these ideas will not remain ideas. We are already beginning to implement them. The fifth point is about bridges. It's about what I call the X factor, the secret sauce, which is the second generation of Israeli Americans. We know that it takes a network to defeat a network like BDS. Israeli Americans, which represent 10% of the American Jewish community, can offer one of the most valuable networks that we have in the fight against BDS. We are moving this fight from defensive to offensive and challenge the BDS narrative. Our hybrid identity is a unique asset. An Israeli-American student or faculty member speaks both Israeli and American. We can tell Israel's story from a very personal point of view. We tell it from first-hand perspective, what it is really like to serve in the IDF, or to have your family live every day under the threat of terror, or to face discrimination on college campus just because of the country where you or your family came from. At the same time, we can speak American in a way that Israelis cannot. We are part of the American people, and by fighting BDS, we're defending the values of our own country. Our new We're talking about high school students, so we have a program called ISA Tanim, which is the first one to bring Jewish American and Israeli Americans together around their passion for Israel. Using project-based learning, we teach leadership and advocacy skills, preparing our high school schoolers to fight BDS when they reach college. We saw the power of Israeli-American community when we mobilized 50,000 people as part of the Celebrate Israel festivals across the nation. It sent a powerful message to elected officials from both parties, including legislators in California, who are now working with us to pass an historical anti-BDS bill in the Golden States. They are true warriors. BDS has been successful because it has found allies. It frames the conflict as a struggle between colonizers and a native people, and uses this identity to build alliances with human rights, minority, and progressive groups. As a minority and immigrant community, Israeli Americans are natural bridges to other minority and immigrant communities. We could outreach to fellow Semitic minorities who are inclined to love us from country of origin, Chinese, Korean, Hindus. We should create a bridgehead with these communities and reinforce the natural bond and then expand outwardly to the others. This is what, for example, Michelano did in UC Berkeley. Last but not least, the fundamental element for success in fighting against BDS is our ability to strengthen the connection between the next generation of American Jews to Israel. I believe that Israeli Americans can become the living bridges between American Jewish community and the State of Israel, fostering its status as the Jewish home. Elie Wiesel said, "Action is the only remedy to indifference, which is the most insidious danger of all. We cannot be indifferent in these fights against a boycott based on race. We must act as one. We must be forceful. We must be resilient. We must win this historic fight on behalf of the Jewish people and the free world." Thank you.
Thank you, Shoam. I think we've got some great point of views so far. There's no one answer. I think a lot of it depends on who you speak to. That in the same way that you have an orchestra that plays different instruments, we can't assume that the way to fight BDS is only through one instrument. my good friend Philippe Passoulin always talks about the importance of image, projecting a positive image of Israel. In the same way that they're so anti, we can be pro-Israel by creating almost a subliminal, powerful, positive, delicious view of Israel. We can never forget the subconscious. I spent 20 years of my life in an ad agency where most of what we talked about was the subconscious, not the conscious, not what's on a brochure, but what's in your mind as an image in the subconscious. And we have so many amazing things about Israel that can resonate with the average student on campus, and I think we should never forget that. So I want to thank our speakers today. And now, for our next panel, I want to turn the floor over to the moderator of our final panel. It's called Speaking from Experience. I want to welcome Noah Fartouk, the Israeli Program Director and Jewish Agency Israel Fellow for Tanger Hillel at Brooklyn College. That's not the Tanger in Morocco. Welcome. It's great. Do you want a podium or you're good here? Okay,
we need to present the speakers.
good. Okay, great. So you know what? So I will present the other speakers. Mr. Matthias Wolf, Vice President of the Jewish Community of Chile. Mr. Yosef Tarshish, Chairperson of the World Union of Jewish Students from the UK. My friend, Mr. Max Samarov, Director of Research and Strategy at Stand With Us. And Benny Fischer, President of European Union of Jewish Students from Germany. Thank you. Noah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So thank you to our panelists who literally came from all around the world to join us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience, students. This could not have happened without you, community leaders and community members. Thank you for joining us. I would like to start the conversation with campuses in the United States. Max Samarov, the Director of Research and as the Director of Research and Strategy of Stand With Us, you've worked with many campuses around the US, you may say hundreds. And I would like to ask from you, what is the most effective way, from your point of view, to create an effective strategy to prevent a BDS to pass on campus?
Thanks, Noah. So first, I want to briefly tell you about the organization I work for and how I got involved. Stand With Us, for those of you who don't know, is an international nonprofit Israel education organization with 18 offices around the world. We're inspired by our love for Israel and our belief that education is the road to peace. We also feel a very deep sense of responsibility to stand up for Israelis when they're being unfairly, publicly attacked or misrepresented. And that's why we do the work that we do with print materials, with campus programs, with high school programs, all the different ways that we try to tell Israel's story and combat some of the misinformation that often distorts the issues. Most inspiring for me, though, is that we bring people together, people like you, to empower them to help overcome the shared challenges that we face as a Jewish and a pro-Israel community. So personally, I started at Stand With Us as a researcher, sitting in an office, behind a computer screen, typing away. But when a BDS campaign came to my university, the one I graduated from, UC Santa Barbara, I knew that I needed to get involved on the ground. And so I've spent the past 4 years organizing against BDS with students and professionals, partner groups across North America. And together, I'm proud to say that we've defeated the majority of BDS campaigns on this continent. And that's a credit to all of you and many people outside this room as well. We've gotten so much more unified over the last few years. You know, Stand With Us works very closely with some of the partners here, AEPI, Hill International, ICC, and so many others. We see it, this cooperation growing constantly, and this is a good example, this conference. But serious challenges remain. We're facing an organized, long-term strategy which doesn't depend on winning every individual vote or actually getting any university to divest any money.